Hello everyone, welcome to Life on the Hulls. And this week I've been working away in some pretty tight compartments, and in a real-time update I'm working on our hydraulic system for our steering, and it is the high drive heavy duty helm. So therefore I've had to put in almost 30 meters, 90 feet or so of annealed copper tubing, and that has created quite a bit of work. It's very challenging getting it to route through and inside over bulkheads, into compartments, and particularly to get it to the slave cylinders on each side of the boat and return. Plus there's balance lines, and there's also a Garmin Smart Pump 2 version 2 autopilot pump that has to be incorporated into the system. There's a lot in this. It's taken weeks of research and weeks of working out the correct fittings and the like to get it installed. I'm almost there. I've got a couple of hoses being made for me for the final install. So very exciting stuff. Now this week we're going to concentrate on some flow coating. At the moment we've got a lot of little jobs in this week's episode. Hopefully we can keep you interested. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and share it out. And thanks to the patrons, you guys make this all happen. Thank you so much, and let's get into it. About 18 months ago I flow coated out my front compartments before we dropped the deck down. And when I did these compartments, I thought we're going to have to glue the deck down. There's going to be glue going everywhere, and I actually had a bit of foresight for once, and I put in all this cardboard into it to stop making a mess on our newly installed Flowcoat. Now I've come today just to clean these compartments out and remove the cardboard, and I'm glad I did, because there's big dollops of epoxy on some of this cardboard that's in here. I've also just temporarily whack some hinges on, because these hatches are almost impossible to get out without a hinge on. And the other thing I've done is drilled a hole center point about where the lock hatch is going to be, which is this type of latch, and essentially this will need a forcing a bit to be able to do the actual correct hole, but I've put a hole in it just so I can get a drill bit in it and open the hatch up, because I can't get my finger into it otherwise. So down in here, this is the chain locker right there. But by putting this cardboard in, all the glue along the seams under here on the center bulkhead, on this bulkhead here, has spilled over onto the cardboard and not onto our fresh flow coat. So I'm just at the point now, I'm just cleaning it out. There's a lot of rubbish and crap in here, and also there's a drain in there. Now we've had some massive storms and they've been blowing the front of the tent here, and the tent's almost on its last legs, this particular part of it anyway. It's got a few holes in it, and water's coming in, landing on the deck and wetting out the cardboard, and obviously it's draining out through the drain hole in the bottom, but not quite as well as I'd like it to. So by removing the cardboard, at least I'm allowing the water to flow through without any further debris. Winner, we've got perfectly clean flow coated hatches. You can see in there the drain that I put in some time ago, and the good thing is I actually drilled from underneath to make sure that I maintained that drain hole, and I'll put some scuppers under that. And obviously now we're able to open and close these hatches. We've still got some protective core fluid on the top of the anti-slip to keep it clean so it doesn't end up like this. But this one here, look at all the crap that's ended up in here over the last 18 months while I've been working on the boat, and trying to give it a clean, and means I can just get a vacuum and vacuum out any debris that might end up in there. As we get to some of the finishing stages of the boat, I'll open up a shelf or something and I'll find that I haven't actually finished it, and it'll create a whole day's work. And an area that is of concern right now is that bed head there. In behind there is all of my windlass wiring, and also wiring for the forward searchlights and for potentially for a camera up front. So that whole area there has not been flow coated out. I'd sort of put it out of my mind conveniently. It's one of those out of mind, out of sight things. So I've mixed up some flow coat here. I'm going to get it flow coated out so that it can at least get the windlass all wired up again. It was wired up. We had to pull it out to finish the windlass hatch, which is just up here. And essentially I can get that finished now just by getting some flow coat in there, get it all wired up, and then it's done. And then Ellen underneath the vacuum cleaner here has made up a template for the top, for the Tasmanian oak top, and it's a 16mm solid wood top that's going to be basically mounted on the top there and form the top of the whole box, and potentially a bit of a bed head for us. Getting set up here this morning. Janet's left me with the 2 davits to spray, and the plan is we've got these pretty nicely fed. They're looking pretty good all over, a couple of little spots, but we're not going to deliberate over this too much. We're just going to get it done. The idea of this is to give it 1 coat of gel coat. So I've got my gel coat mixed up in here. Now I've thinned it slightly with styrene. There's no wax in this, it's actually gel coat. And then what I'll do, I'll come back about an hour later after it's all set up, and while I've still got that chemical reaction, and I'll spray Flowcoat, which is about 5% wax and styrene added to the gel coat, which will give me that surface layer with which to be able to then come back and wet sand and polish them down to a final finish. Not going to go too heavy on this, because the thicker you put it on, the more you got to sand off, because the idea is to get a nice smooth finish. It's not like spray painting a car where you're putting on a micro film of material. You're actually spraying quite a lot of material, and it's going to go everywhere. So I'm going to have to suit up, get some plastic bags on my feet. And I want these to look absolutely fantastic, and particularly what you're looking at most of the time when you're on the boat is this face, which has got to look good. But when you're looking at it from behind, you're going to look at it the underside face. So that's going to take some work. So I'm going to do that tomorrow after I've done the first side here. I'll be able to flip them over and then do it. It's going to take probably 4 or 5 sessions to get these sprayed. They are quite complex. I did actually try hanging them, but that sort of didn't really work. They're very, very heavy, and I don't really have the setup here to do that. Right, that's the first layer of gel coat. Now the thing with gel coat is it's going to stay tacky. The reality is if you were to start sanding that, you're going to fill up your sandpaper. So the next job is to spray Flowcoat. So that's about an hour ago. So it doesn't take long. When you spray gel coat, it goes off super, super quick. And that's just part and parcel of aerosoling any item. It tends to thin it right out. And because I thinned it with styrene, got a little bit of orange peeling on it, and in the areas where I need it to be a bit thicker, there's some globs. So they're going to have to be sanded down. But you know, in reality, they look pretty good. Given the amount of work I put into them, I think they're almost ready to install. Three goes I had at adding gel coat and flow coat to this. Had to do the upsides as it is now, and then I had to flip it over and then do the underside, and it's now ready for polish. I reckon a light 600, 800, 1000, 1200 and move into our polishes. Should be able to sort that out. There's a couple of little lumps here I had to fill a bit, but you know, overall they look absolutely amazing, and we've been going on about these davits for some time, as we have with the whole bloody build, but that's all set up. I'm going to leave that till probably 2 days. I'll let cure. It has gone off and it's hard, but I'd rather leave it and let it go rock hard before we come in and start to sort of blend this thing down to a polished finish. But yeah, they're looking pretty good. There's a little build up here and a little bit of build up here, but that's actually good because this here was actually a seam line where we'd done the additional glassing to beef these up. Honey, we're going to put a davit up. I want to get them up. They look all beautiful and polished because you've spent so much time, and this will be the ultimate reward for you. So how about we put your davit up? You like the way I explained that to make it sound appealing, even though it's going to be a prick of a job.
Like there's an option?
There's no option. Come on, let's go and do it. There's always an option. It's just that there's always nothing better to do than something big. Righto, let's do it. I love it. I love the look. I do love it. It's a good look. I know they're old school, but they really suit the boat. The fashion's fantastic. The curves. Right, so I'm just going to dry fit this and then I'll get it down. PK can weld it up for me. Well, this is a pretty simple part, but it'll give the whole thing a lot more stability. You got to remember, once we've got a tender hanging off it, that'll actually give it stability as well. So I can get nuts and bolts and washers in behind there. So the whole thing's supported by nuts, bolts and washers, and basically will be a very, very strong part. I probably have some wire in between down here. Originally it had some wire on it, but I may even put another one of these stainless rods in between. We'll see how we go, but I don't think it's necessary right now. So about 6 months ago, I expanded out the windlass hatch, and Janet then went and fabricated the actual hatch for me upside down. We expanded it out. It fits perfectly, and it had 4 corners of anti-slip because that was the original hatch. We took the moulding off. We then needed to decide what to do with it. Put drink holders in it, all anti-slip, put a strip of anti-slip in it. And you know what we decided ultimately was we were just going to anti-slip the whole thing. We didn't want drink holders in it, even though it's probably going to be our sundowner table or a coffee table in the morning, so it wouldn't collect water. And we didn't want a trip hazard up on the deck. So yesterday, I solved the issue in about 10 minutes. I went up and found a sheet of anti-slip that I laid up. I had some spare stuff, and I've since come in here and glued it down here. I've got 4 batteries holding it in place here, and essentially it's done now. All we've got to do is tidy up and trim it, and then re-gel coat around the edges, and the whole thing's done. Pretty happy to get that job in a hurry. And one of those little jobs has been eating at me for a long time, because of every time I walk up on the bow, I think your days are numbered down there, mate. Now I know it's not much, but the surrounding anti-slip, if you ever look how dirty it is compared to a nice clean bit, it's actually the cleanest part of the whole bloody boat. But that looks really, really good, and it's finished the job. It wasn't that difficult to do. It took me about half an hour to complete that task yesterday. Cut it and glue it down, leave it overnight, and it's done. One of those jobs that you sort of really look forward to doing, and then you have to do a little bit of thinking before you do it, is fitting hatch latches. Now these can be a little bit awkward to fit, and it's very, very important that you have a depth in the substrate to make sure that you don't actually burrow through the entire hatch before you start. Now, a way to fit these correctly, I've found, is with a Forstner bit. I've got a 50.8 or a 2-inch Forstner bit here, which actually will burrow into the hatch lid only through the first substrate and foam, leaving the bottom of the hatch itself actually still remaining. And what that does, it actually allows you to then screw the backing plate on. If you go all the way through, you don't have any material with which to screw the backing plate on, and it doesn't fit properly. So I've actually fitted a couple over here, and these are only temporarily fitted, but I can actually show you what this is going to look like in here. So as you can see here, I'm only going to burrow in until I get to the bottom of the substrate, and this is why we foam core back these hatches, and then we drill another hole, and the whole thing fits in place, and then we'll obviously Sikaflex that in place. Now I could recess this into the actual anti-slip, and that always looks nice. Now if I was doing this commercially or as a production boat, that's what I'd do. I'd actually change the mold to have this consideration here already inset into the anti-slip, but because it's my boat, I'm happy to have them not so much flush and just ready to go. So I've actually drilled a hole here. Now this hole actually is the basis of this. You've got to work out the distance between this. Latch actually slides underneath the rim of the actual hatch lid, or the hatch rim underneath. But so that's where that hole has to be. The only problem is that's not center. The center is actually here. So we'll be taking the Forstner bit here and actually burrowing this out, and then I'll be able to fit this with a little bit of adjustment, get it in, get it flush like I've done with these guys over here. I've got about 20 of these things to fit boat wide. Now I actually bought these, they're 316 supposedly. I bought these for around about $24 each Australian, so that's about 16 US dollars, I'd imagine. There was a wholesaler here that was actually wholesaling these for 80 Australian dollars and retailing for 120. Now there's something wrong with that. And unfortunately, I think the internet's actually wrecking a lot of businesses, but also keeping everybody honest. And whether it's the same quality or not, I'm not sure. I'd like to get hold of one of the more expensive ones and have a good look and see if they were, but I'm convinced it's the same product, just with a higher middleman margin. And I'm actually a wholesaler myself, but 400% margin on something small like this, it's easy to freight, quick to get in stock, is pretty, yeah, it's pretty lousy, I reckon. But you know, business is business. So let's get into it. Let's drill this hole out. You really can't believe the amount of time you can spend just fitting 6 latches. I think I've been going for a couple of hours. Just getting them dry fitted has been an important part of this, because now I can work out the inside drainage, which I don't have. These are technically wet lockers, but I intend to put a little bit of drainage in to avoid having too much water getting in them. Particularly on the windlass hatch here, I've got to do a lot of work underneath, and until I had these fitted, I've got a little scar there from where the force bit jumped out of me, but that was my fault. I wasn't leaning on it properly, but anyway, nothing that can't be fixed. And I've got a very, very dirty deck, as you can see. So what I'm going to do, I've actually got these core flute covers. I'm going to put them back on the hatches, because it's just going to be a hell of a lot less cleaning if I do that. I'll whack them back on, and then we can move on to something else. Anyone that's worked with fiberglass and gel coat will know that this is not going to be a one-shot deal. I'm going to put some brushed Flowcoat onto this now, and then it's going to require hand sanding to get to a final finish where I can then spray Flowcoat or brush Flowcoat to get down to a polish. Unlike paint, where you can put one layer of undercoat and then a couple of layers on it and you end up with a perfect finish. With gel coat, the important thing is that you get a lot of material on and then polish down to a smooth finish. And the beauty of gel coat is that it can be polished, and you do have a lot of material on there so that you don't have to worry about wearing through. Whereas with paint, as soon as you wear down and chip, you've got fading and all these other issues. With gel coat, you can simply polish it, and that's why I love gel coat. There is the downside of it: A, it's heavier; B, it is harder to work with. I find it a lot harder to work with than paint, but by the same token, I can repair the entire vessel with just one pot of gel coat. I could probably fix every chip on the boat with one cupful once every few months, than having to find paint and colour match. I'm just basically going to keep a pot of white gel coat and some catalyst on board, and I'm ready to do a repair on the entire boat. That's so important. But for now, I've just got some Flowcoat here. I've mixed wax and styrene into the gel coat, made my own Flowcoat. I'm just going to paint it on. It is going to be a bit unlevel, and then I'll start working on it at a later date. I'll let it set up, and we'll go from there. I fabricate and Janet has to finish. I like this deal.
Okay.
Doing a great job, Dylan. That looks absolutely beautiful. It's amazing how you make something look good after it's just a patchwork quilt, but yeah, we basically just got to put a little bit more gel on there. Not worried about underneath. I'll have to level that up at some point and then we'll finish it. But yeah, looking good. Got this is almost perfect here. And I've increased the recess here for the hinges because my hinges are a little bit bigger than I thought they were. Looking good. Well done. Finally, I get to do something reasonably exciting, and exciting to me can be a range of very mediocre things, but today I'm going to start hooking up the water system for our engines, and that's very important to me. And what it means is I'm getting closer and closer to actually ticking these guys over. Now, I've got Zach here for a couple of weeks, and we intend to at least get these guys started. But the first things first, I need to hook up a water system for it, and then we need to hook up the exhaust system. So there's going to be quite a bit go on here over the next couple of weeks. while I get ready for this moment. Now, I've actually fitted the strainer just here, and that is in a place that I can easily access and check on a regular basis without having to crawl into the engine space. It just means I can lean straight in. Fortunately able to get this nice and close. I didn't want it too close to our battery. You want to try and keep your water away from the bulk of your electrics, but obviously we have to have some electrics near it. It's an engine. But so up in here will be the strainer. The intake is actually from underneath, so that will go down towards the through hole down at the stern there near that hatch there, and then it will come out the side here and go straight down into the impeller. Now, we've had to mount this 40 centimeters above waterline, and that's pretty much about where we are right now. And then we're also going to have a vented loop up here, which is above 40 centimeters above the actual waterline. That's basically going to feed the wet exhaust down here, so it'll go out of there and back into there, and obviously that's going to give us the correct height for the water going out through the exhaust, through that wet exhaust. And obviously the exhaust is all coming up. So we're using Vetus 25mm water hose, and obviously we always need to use 2 stainless hose clamps. Very, very important. We use those, at least 2 on every single outlet here, so that we don't end up with any leakage, but I'll put those on in a moment. But this one basically just slides straight on here like so, nice and simple. And then one on here, and the second one. We do not want this busting off, because if you do, you get them out with salt water all the way through your engines. And then we'll put another 2 on for down on the impeller. Alright, so so just trying to work out my raw water to the exhaust, and what I'm doing is I'm just using this vacuum hose to work out the distances and the routing of the actual hoses up to the vented loop, so I can basically just measure that, and I've determined that that's 700 mils long. In fact, both of them are. That one's 700 and this one's 700 down to here, which gets us to our mixing elbow, and then we can work out our exhaust system. And then our water intake, which goes up into the strainer there, will run along this ledge here, all the way down to our intake down here, trying to keep everything neat and tidy. And more importantly, what I'm trying to do is leave plenty of access around the outside of the engine room to get to wiring and the like. And if it's up on the ledge here, it's out of the way. It certainly is a lot neater and can be controlled a little bit better. Happy with that. That's out of the way. That's one hose I just don't have to worry about. Okay, so we've got the water coming out of our heat exchanger here and up to our vented loop. Nice and simple. And then there's another one coming down at the vented loop into our exhaust riser.